Coming up on episode 77 of the Behind the Back podcast, the Eagles are Super Bowl champions. We're a week behind, but we're going to talk about it. Ben and I break down our takes for what we saw from the game, and then we pivot over to Sacramento, where we don't know what this team is doing, but there's a lot of new faces, so we talk about what we need to do to make it to the playoffs, make a playoff push. With that being said, guys, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet Reds. Ben, how are you, brother? How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm probably not as good as you because you're coming off a Super Bowl victory, but I'm pretty good. I've been enjoying the break from football and basketball for a bit.
Heck yeah, dude. And yes, sir, as for those audio listeners, you won't be able to see this lovely photo I have behind me, but now I got Super Bowl champion Jalen Hurts behind me on my wall. He's not currently attached to my wall. Good news, big news. The reason we didn't record last week is because the wifey and I found a new place here in Sacramento, 10 minutes away from this dude right here. So there's going to be a lot of fun developments coming, whether that means for the future of the pod, how we're going to have things set up moving forward. So yeah, super happy, but it's been super busy. So we decided to, nix last week and just kind of get settled in to the new place. So super happy and we're super excited. So yeah, big news there. But on top of that, obviously the Eagles won the freaking Super Bowl, dude. And let's start with that. For those who heard the intro and for those who watched the post-game pod last week, I put my heart and soul into that. The emotions were very raw and pure right after the game that next morning. So it was very fun to record that, and but to celebrate, yeah. Oh, thanks, brother. To celebrate a Super Bowl victory, it's been very nice. Obviously, it's been overshadowed by just the move of it all, but that hasn't stopped me from watching the game 4 separate times now up until here. I've been obsessing, dude. Again, this one compared to Super Bowl that we won in 2017. This just feels so much better given how good this team was from start to finish the whole year in terms of just the roster, the star power on this roster together, and it was our main quarterback from start to finish. So everyone who's listened has heard my take on this. So I wanted to ask you a few questions on the Super Bowl and what you thought about it. So first off, when did you know that the game was over, in your opinion? When did you feel like the game was over?
I mean, you could have picked a number of spots in this game and said that was the turning point where it felt like the Chiefs couldn't come back. But for me, when Patty threw the pick to Cooper DeJean and Coop just ran it in for 6, I was pretty convinced the game was over. I get that it was only 17-0, but at that point the Eagles were rolling and they really weren't about to let up. And the bigger thing for me was that at that point, you go into halftime and I'm like, okay, they've got, the Chiefs just got to get like any points whatsoever up on the board. And if they can really come out and make a statement and get a quick touchdown, like they could essentially be quote unquote back in this game, because that's all it really takes for an elite style, legendary quarterback, whatever you want to call it, Patrick Mahomes. That's all it really takes to get some of these guys going. And when they came out and didn't really make any noise, I was pretty convinced it was over.
Yeah, the consistency in which the defense played in this one was unbelievable. For me, I thought about, after the Cooper pick, I was like, holy crap. It kind of hit me a little bit. I was like, I can't believe this is actually happening, the way it was happening. And then it was after the Bond interception. And, we get it right by the goal line. We had to settle. We couldn't finish in the red zone, and then we got it right back off the Zach Bond thing, and then it was an AJ touchdown, and we're up 24-0 with 2 minutes or under 2 minutes before halftime, and I was just like, and then right after that, the ensuing possession, the Chiefs could have put up some points, and DeAndre Hopkins had that drop, and I was like, okay, everything's going for us. This is it. Like, this is over.
Hop's got to hang it up, bro.
You know what, like,
He's got to hang it up.
It was tough. That was tough. Like, listen, I get the throw was like a little off, but like he's throwing off. He's on the move. Like, can't be perfect. Like D Hop has been a legend for so many years. You
Mm-hmm.
gotta come up with that, especially because there was no one in front of you either. Like, you catch it and you're running to the end zone, dude. So
It's a tutty.
it was tough. Like, it was tough for the Chiefs. Like, the refing was against them, which is funny to say. And
Must be nice. Must be freaking nice for once. Look at my team over here who hasn't gotten a single call in a Super Bowl. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
No, yeah. So so we got that, and obviously the defensive pressure, Mahomes getting sacked for the most times in his career, which is weird to think that like 6 sacks, like I know 6 sacks is a lot, but I've heard of other quarterbacks getting sacked 7, 8, 9 times. So for that to happen was pretty impressive. So
Though, on that note, it was the style that Patty got sacked. It wasn't just like he barely went down. No, the 4-man rush that he was seeing throughout the entire game, and no, not a single blitz was called. It was a Vic Fangio masterclass. The 4-man rush that the Eagles put together to just put all the pressure in Patty's face, and ultimately, like, he couldn't go anywhere. And so the way he was sacked is what really stood out to me in this one. The 6 sacks, they were aggressive. There was no way for him to get out of those.
yeah, and yeah, he was just running for his life. He never felt comfortable. And that was really interesting to see. I wasn't expecting, like, I knew it was going to be important that they won the matchup, but I felt like we were going to need to trick them a little bit. I didn't think it was just going to be like, hey, we're going to send 4, drop 7, and that's all you're going to get the whole game. We didn't, we even mixed in some dime packages where we had 6 defensive backs in the backfield the whole time. So it was interesting to see those different kind of combinations and to just have our guys win up front. Which was great because, if you wanted to compare, I feel like you could ask most Eagles fans, like, oh, this defensive line's really good. But if you compared it to the defensive line of 22 with Hassan Reddick and Javon Hargrave, Fletcher Cox, the NBG, you would think like, oh, that crew, which led, had the historic sack season, like that crew did a really good job. And and this crew this year was doing a good job, but I wasn't anticipating this. And that was awesome to see in the biggest stage. So I wanted to ask you too, now that, obviously Saquon got stuffed in this game. It wasn't a Saquon Barkley game. It was a defense and Jalen Hurts game. But, we talked about all the different styles that the Eagles have played this year and have won this year. As a Niners fan, does after now that, the world has seen the Chiefs finally get beat, that kind of Goliath get slain, right? Do you feel more confident in the Niners moving forward, knowing that there is a formula out there that exists and that, your team could potentially get there because you guys have gotten that close before? So I'm just curious, like, after watching that game as a Niners fan, does that make you feel more confident moving forward?
It should. Here's why it doesn't. I have seen the Niners now fail to address the O-line and the D-line properly for a number of years running. And what I saw in this game and what I saw throughout the playoffs really and a lot of the regular season, but in this game especially against the Chiefs, was just trench domination. And from that standpoint, I think about what the Niners have to address this offseason. And obviously we're going to have a lot of talks, as the offseason progresses about where we need to build our teams at. But, for me, the number one priority this offseason, in terms of what positions you need to build on, what positions you need to fill, it's got to be that O-line and that D-line. And I don't have the faith that the Niners will get it done. And I've had the faith every single year. I'm like, they're going to address the O-line. We got to address the O-line. We got to address the D-line. We got to get an opposite rusher to Nick Bosa. Like we've got everything else essentially, made. We've got everything else put in place to make a Super Bowl run. You just need to build a dominant front. And we've failed to do that every single year. So I'm curious to see, and where I'm hopeful is that the 49ers front office was watching the Eagles in this Super Bowl, because this was the team that was ultimately going to take down the Chiefs if there was any, because that formula was the only formula to take down a quarterback and a coaching style of the Chiefs and Patty Mahomes. So I'm I'm hopeful, but I don't know that I'm optimistic, if that makes sense.
No, it's totally fair. And it is one of those things that I was curious about because I felt, the Niners, the one how close they played them the year before, and then how well the Eagles played them the year before that. I was like, this is a beatable team. And I know because the Eagles got them in the regular season last year, if I felt even better about it, I was like, if we match up against the Chiefs, we can win this game. But I did feel like everything had to go right, which it did, but I also didn't anticipate it to go so right that it was just this historic level blowout up until the end. Um so and a lot of that falls on, where the defense did wonderful, but a lot of that does go to Nick Sirianni for leading this team through all this weird turbulence that
Hmm.
they've had to go through this year, all the storylines, all the nonsense. And now, after the fact, he's being rewarded for it. The Eagles, Kellen Moore, the former offensive coordinator, is now the head coach of the Saints. That was already, a topic before the Super Bowl happened, and that was pretty well known. And he coached the game of his life, so he deserves it. Shout out to Kellen. And they already hired a new OC from within, Kevin Patulio. So it'll
Hmm.
be very interesting to see how that works out. Him and Nick Sirianni have a good, close relationship. But we saw what happened the last time the Eagles made a deep run and stuck with an internal hire. So that will be something to monitor this year.
Hmm.
Um, but like this team was special. And the problem is this team, there's a lot of great pieces here, but there are some things to address, and it's going to be interesting to see who we keep and who we let go because we're not going to keep everybody. And there's about 8 to 9 super important players, mainly on the defensive side of the ball, that we might risk losing. The question is Vic Fangio entering his Steve Spagnuolo arc of his career, where he's going to
Ooh.
finish his career in Philly, but now he has this established system. He's a Super Bowl winning coach, and is he that talented to where we're going to lose some guys, but how he can draft insane, and will he be able to just reuse and recycle lower level players and get the most out of them like he did this year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this team in the offseason. Defensively, I'm feeling good because we have so many young pieces, but it will definitely be interesting to see. Um, but so many good things came out of this Super Bowl. And I need you to take a second to just tell me how you feel about that guy right there, about Jalen Hurts. How did you think he did in this game? I understand the defense was the story, and I'm not saying that Jalen Hurts, you know, did he deserve Super Bowl MVP over every other defender in the field? Probably not. But at the end of the day, Jalen Hurts is a Super Bowl MVP and a Super Bowl champion. So is there anything you'd like to say about my quarterback?
I'm so sorry. No. Jalen played a hell of a game, and it was definitely the game of his career. You for essentially as long as I've known you and Jalen Hurts together, you've always talked a big talk with him, and you're always way more confident than the rest of the world is in Jalen Hurts, and for reasons that never really made a ton of sense to me. But at the same time, I kind of related because it's how I felt about Brock for all this time. So similar situations there, right? But ultimately, Jalen played a hell of a game. Jalen stepped up to the plate when that run game was not working. I mean, shout out to Spagnola for putting together a good scheme defensively and stopping that run game. We kind of knew going in that it was going to be tough. We definitely knew that the emphasis was going to be on stopping the run game first and foremost. And then we knew from there that Jalen was going to be asked to throw the ball. And I while I credit Jalen Hurts and I absolutely give him, all the praise in this game, I also got to hand it to Kellen Moore because, like you said, he had one of his best, if not his best, coaching outing, his coached game of his career, and that absolutely showed. We talked about how I talked about how the schemes that he was drawing up, the route running that he had his receivers on, was bland. It was boring. They weren't getting the separation, and it seemed like AJ and Devontae were just kind of going through the reps out there, and it was like, okay, this doesn't feel sustainable, especially if the Eagles run into a team that can stop the defense. But then when they stopped the run game, but then when they did, Jalen stepped up, Kellen stepped up. Like it was just a really really solid game from those two. So I full on respect it. I understand now where you're coming from, that Jalen Hurts can step up and win a game. I am curious to see, with Kellen stepping away and with the new hiring at the offensive coordinator position. Now, what, nine offensive coordinators in Jalen's
career? Yeah,
career?
since his senior year of high school until now, he's had a new play caller every
So
season.
that is another respect right there. I mean, dude has had to learn an entirely new system basically every single year. And I mean, not entirely new system, but every coach does things different, especially from a coordinator standpoint. So yeah, it's going to be tough, but I have faith in Hurts to get it done.
Yeah, and it's not just Jalen Hurts either. Nick Sirianni is the first coach in NFL history to have 4 new offensive coordinators in 4 consecutive seasons with the same team. So, it's not the only one to have 4 different ones, but he's the only one to have 4 different ones for the same team. That's a testament to how good this team has been, at least on the offensive side of the ball, having all these pieces and guys finding ways to make it work. So this team just is well built. This is when we talk about, I think when we talk about like championship teams, you always have to talk about it's a top to bottom thing. It starts from, Jeffrey Lurie being an amazing owner and giving, his GM the ability to have control and do his job. And it goes down to them trusting Nick Sirianni. And that was a risk last year. They took it. And now they're rewarding Nick Sirianni with letting him choose his coaching staff this time around. So it'll be interesting to see. But now that's the thing. Now nothing else matters. Now it's like, you can try to push for a back-to-back title, but at the end of the day, people still believe in the Lions and people want the Commanders and people want a new team next year. So the pressure will be on Philly, but I don't think it's at a level, because the disrespect is still kind of there. I think people think that like, oh, this team was awesome, they were the best team this year and they showed it. But there's definitely a level of like, okay, they won this year, now let's see if they can do it again. But I feel great. I know it's easy to say when you win the thing, say like, nothing else matters. Of course you want to go back to the chip. But getting 2 Super Bowls in 8 seasons is it's a cool thing. It's something that, again, you don't really see that often. So I'm definitely riding this wave and super happy, for everything that this season has brought. It was a great team, great year. I've watched all the freaking mic'd up stuff and I got to enjoy it and just, truly enjoy like the winning process of it all. So I hope that you sitting next to me here will get that opportunity here soon. And I know you and I in the offseason will break down a lot of the reasons why the Niners have a very good shot next year. So it'll be interesting to see. But did you have any final thoughts on the Super Bowl before we pivot on here?
Just congratulations. I know it probably feels good. I can only imagine what it feels like. But at some point, the Niners will win a Super Bowl, and I'll be right here on this podcast saying, dude, it feels so good. This is crazy. I never knew it felt like this.
I only had to wait 50 years for it, and we're still potting and stuff, and we'll be good.
I'm going to have gray all in my beard, all in my hair before I see a Niners win. Like, it's going to be wild. But no, dude, it was a fun game. The halftime show was
It's fine.
It's Kendrick is awesome, but I felt like the production and the overall like sound quality was pretty poor. They kind of did him no justice there.
It was so quiet relative to like the music that was playing. So like,
SZA's mic was off in the first time around. Like it was just kind of it was poorly done. But
and Kendrick, throwing him in there is more for like the if you know crowd in terms of the fans. Like I'm sure 90% of the fans watching out there, 90% of the fans watching out there didn't even know who Kendrick was until today. Yeah. So definitely funny, and it was an interesting performance. Like I know what he was trying to do. Everyone was aware of what he was trying to do. But yeah, I didn't really care one way or the other.
It was yeah, no, that's fair. It was interesting going back and seeing some of these videos about the potential Easter eggs that were linked to the halftime show. And I mean, you can go on and on about all these theories, and realistically, half of them might be true. But even if half of them are true. It's pretty wild. I mean, it took a lot of thought, from that standpoint to kind of make the messages that he was making.
No, absolutely, for sure. So, what we'll do now is we're going to pivot on. This was a great season for the Eagles, but now it's time to get just a friggin' what is it? It's February 19th. So basically a month off, and then I got to do draft prep. So, take a little break. 6 weeks, behind on everybody now. So we get a smaller vacation, but great season for the Eagles. This will be the last time we talk about them for a little bit, unless we hear something major like Myles Garrett maybe coming over. So we'll see what happens. But we're going to pivot over to the Kings. We've got a lot to talk about. This is a new look team now. So stay with us. We'll be right back. All right, we are back to talk some Sacramento Kings. So, we last time we talked, we were like, oh, Zach LaVine. Yeah, this was when I was in Arizona visiting my mom. We had just found out about the Zach LaVine trade. We're like, okay, let's add a few new pieces. And then what happened? Okay, Jonas Valanciunas joins the fold, traded for him. And we also traded for forward Jake LaRavia. I hope I'm saying his last name right, from
That's right.
Memphis. And we also recently just added Markelle Fultz as some point guard depth onto this roster. It's been 7 games since the loss of our, beloved point guard De'Aaron Fox. Not to sound petty or anything, but we have a better record than they do since the trade. So great start. But I know, because listen, I'm gonna, as transparent as I can be, I have been watching from afar as, my football team made it all the way to the end. My attention has been elsewhere. But this guy has been suffering, disgusted. He has some takes on this particular roster now that it's been 6 games, because the first game was without LaVine and all these guys. So 5-6 games with this new group. I want your take on what have you noticed? Is there any concerning trends that you're seeing with certain lineups, or even just the new guys in general that you're worried about? Or are there good things you're noticing that you're like, okay, we can totally build off this? So give me that temperature check for the Kings.
Yeah, so the biggest thing that kind of irks me right now is that Zach LaVine got to Sacramento and completely forgot how to shoot. I don't know what it is in the water in Sacramento, bro, but there's something going on where when a guy gets to Sacramento, his shooting percentages just plummet. And obviously, look, this is a completely stylistically different team than what Zach was used to in Chicago with the Bulls there. This offense, at least up until recently, like the last game, was a high action. There's a lot of action, a lot of movement style of play, and there's something to be said that that kind of game and that kind of play can kind of tire you out as the game goes on. And ultimately, that's why maybe your shooting percentages drop or whatnot. But a little frustrating on that front. Now, the positives, though, is we're seeing a tremendous amount of growth from Keon Ellis. You called that last season. We talked about this, and you were like, Keon is our guy. Keon is going to be massive for this team. I think that we need to invest in Keon, so on and so forth. And he is absolutely showing why he is one of the better two-way players in this league from a defensive and an offensive standpoint. And right now, where I'm running into is this lineup with Keon Ellis is the only one that seems successful for the Sacramento Kings right now.
And you're right. Like, Keon has proven this year that he's kind of almost that X factor, especially his ability to just do everything now. His offense is much more confident now that he's kind of has a little bit more free reign. His defense is obviously his calling card. But he is starting to grow into that connecting piece, right? I battle with this because we traded for LaVine, but you have said this off the pod that you'd want to start Keon, or correct me if I'm wrong if I'm saying that incorrectly, but you had mentioned Zach and DeMar on the floor at the same time right now doesn't seem to be the best fit. So I guess my question to you is, do you want Keon to start? And in a world like who and how, what do you think?
So for me, I actually thought about this a good amount here recently. I don't care so much about if he starts, but I want Keon Ellis closing the game because the last what feels like 6 games, 7 games, bro. These have been tight games at the end where we need to get stops. And the last game going into the All-Star break, this is over a week ago. The last game going into the All-Star break was a all-out shootout. I mean, it ended like 130 something to, it was way up there in overtime. And the reason we lost that game was because DeMar couldn't hit a bucket down the stretch, and he was the only guy that we were going to. Like it was just
Yeah.
it was just a stagnant game. And for me, when Keon's out there, yeah, he's got a weird jumper, but it goes in, and he's proven that he's made 7 and 9 threes in a game already this season. Like he can absolutely throw the ball up, and at the very least, he's going to give you the best defensive output in the entire court. Like that to me is why you need to be closing games with Keon Ellis if it's a tight ball game,
Hmm.
because you need his defense down the stretch. Why are you keeping Keegan Murray out there if he's not making buckets? Like to me, it's kind of the same deal. Keegan's been having a horrendous year offensively, but he's been doing a great job defensively. And yet we consistently start games with him, and we consistently close games with him. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I'm just wondering why it's different with a guy like Keon Ellis, who does all the same, but is proven to be a little bit more reliable down the stretch of games, or at least during this season. So I think for me, I just want to see Keon closing games when it's close.
Mm-hmm. So what? So are you saying you would prefer Keon over Keegan in these closing spots?
No, I don't think it's Keegan. I think I would take him over either Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan. And if I had to take one right now, I put Zach on the bench because he's not as used to our system yet. He's not as used to our team, and and as he gets more accustomed to it and starts to fit in a little bit more, then you can start to maybe start closing games with him. But I think he's got to go to the bench, and Keon's got to close out these games.
And I think that's totally ish fair. I don't know if I fully agree with that. I think the thing is with the struggles offensively, I do think it's a product of when Levine got here. We're in the middle of this stretch where we're playing, 20 some games on the road, and a lot of them are. Yeah, it's a long road trip. It's hard to get settled. You're not in one place for more than a week. So I do think it just makes it a little bit difficult for these guys to just find a rhythm in the middle of all this.
Mhm.
And that's not even just now it's no longer just Zach LaVine, it's Jonas Valanciunas, it's Laravia, and now we're gonna probably throw Markel in there, and he's probably gonna see some minutes. It'll be interesting to see. But the Keon Ellis of it all, it sucks. If Keon was Keegan's size, he'd be starting, and he'd be probably an all-star at this point because of how he plays. But we have so much guard talent on this team. Talent, I guess it's not the right kind of talent, I wouldn't say. I know we talked about the Malik Monk of it all, of him. I felt kind of confident with Fox leaving that Malik Monk would be able to step up into that role. And while he has shown flashes, it's definitely been an adjustment period for him too. So you know, I want to be optimistic, and I want to say that these guys hopefully during this All-Star break got some time together, because none of them partook in any of the activities over the weekend. So I hope that these guys spent some time, even if they're getting rest, but time together to just kind of figure out what we can do to get better to make this playoff push. My question to you is: Do you think has your expectations of this team changed, or do you still think that they can be a top 6 team, or do you think that they're destined for the play-in, and you'd be okay with that and hope that they can maybe win a game and then see what happens in the offseason and go from there?
Expectations have changed for the short term and the long term for me personally. I will say that I believe wholeheartedly this team at best is a play-in team this year. I don't think that they're a top 6 seed anymore. Um, and what kind of frustrates me is right now there is essentially no building block for the Sacramento Kings. Like when I look at so before I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Ultimately, if you make the play-in, and you win a game and you get into the playoffs, I'm pretty sure we're a first round exit. Obviously, it depends on the matchup, and obviously, how well we've meshed by that point, right? Because anything can happen. I mean, this is sports. Literally anything can happen any given night. So they could prove me wrong out the gate here, but I wouldn't be surprised if they win that play-in game. Sure, make it to the playoffs and get just obliterated because they're not defensively equipped or equipped at all to make a run. So this is where then I pivot to, what do we look like, or rather, what are we building here in Sacramento? Because when we had De'Aaron Fox and we had Domantas Sabonis, there was a clear direction. There were two guys you 100% built around, right? Then you incorporate Keegan Murray. You draft Keegan Murray, and he has this amazing rookie season where we're talking about him being the next Kawhi Leonard, right? At very best, but at very worst, he's an absolute role player for this team that we should absolutely be depending on. But then he puts up a 50 bomb against Utah, and we're like, holy like this guy's actually, he's got something. He's got that it gene. But then he lays a goose egg in his junior year. So you're now asking yourself, is Keegan Murray a building block? Is Malik Monk a franchise style player for this team, or just in general? Is Zach LaVine going to be here for the long term? Can we afford to keep him here for the long term? DeMar DeRozan has alluded to not necessarily wanting to be here if De'Aaron Fox, the guy who really was the reason he came here, is no longer here. So I'm curious to see who you build around other than Domantas Sabonis, which I believe wholeheartedly is our best player. I've believed that for a while, but we're not even using Domas the way that we used to. Like when you look at Beam Team 1, everything ran through Domas. And now Domas is getting like 15 boards because there's a whole bunch of ISO play because we have an ISO style team. That's not sustainable. And that's why I'm so less optimistic than you are, because I'm looking at the style of play that the top 6 teams in the Western Conference are utilizing. And I'm like, well, these are legit teams that also play defense, but offensively can beat you at all 5 levels, right? And then I look at the Kings and they can't really do that. And on top of that, they're one of the worst defensive teams now. So I'm nervous because even if you make the playoffs this year and you make it through the first round and you're into the second round, well, now you got a question like I just said, is DeMar going to be back next year? Is that enough to convince him? Does he even want to be back? Is he going to request a trade? Is Keegan Murray, what's his contract going to look like? Because he's going to be eligible for an extension, this offseason. So what do you offer him? What does his money look like? We'll have those conversations. But, Malik Monk is another player who took a massive pay cut to be here in Sacramento with De'Aaron Fox. Domantas Sabonis took a contract extension here to play with who? De'Aaron Fox. So the one guy that we were building this entire freaking team around is no longer here. And that was my biggest concern going into the entire conversations that we had around De'Aaron Fox being traded. And this is kind of where I'm sitting right now. Like, I don't have a lot of optimism for the future of the Kings, regardless of how this season ends.
Got it. So do you think that there's just no easy way out? Do you think we're kind of now, do you feel like we're back in this, purgatory style where we will be semi-competitive, have good spurts where we can look really competitive, but just not really because we don't have that roster balance yet? Like, do you think that, these moves that we made are basically something we have to take the L on for this season and try to find a way to move on, whether it's trading DeMar and LaVine or, maybe trying to find someone who will, potentially buy high on Murray if that meant setting ourselves up a little bit better for the future?
It's hard to say because this front office right now is making moves like their job is on the line, not like they're willing to necessarily build for the future.
Right.
They're building for the now because they don't want to lose their jobs. And I mean, I hate to say that, but it's at this point, that's how it is. everything that's shaken down the way it has, with De'Aaron Fox, with Mike Brown and that whole situation, everything from essentially that December period on to this point has been disastrous. It essentially wiped away all of the progress that you made when you hired Mike Brown and you started building this legit team. Now it's hard to say what the direction is, and it's hard to say, if you just take the L this season, right? Like you said, and you look at potentially building for future, well then can you actually build for the future? Because Marcos, we've pushed a legit rebuild down the road for so long. We really have never fully rebuilt. When we drafted Fox, we weren't fully rebuilding. We hadn't committed to tanking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we got pretty dang lucky that we landed that pick, and we got pretty dang lucky that De'Aaron Fox landed in our laps. Like, it took things kind of working out for us to get in the situation we were. This is not a franchise who has proven to know how to build a competent team after a situation like what just unfolded. So that's why it's hard to say. But is it possible? Absolutely. You have guys who are worth something. You have guys that know how to play ball. And if you can establish in this last third of the season, right, who your core group is, who are the guys who are committed to what this team's direction is, if you can establish those guys and establish a new core in Sacramento and then build the team this offseason around that, make some moves, maybe move up in the draft, figure out if there's a way to get in the lottery somehow by trading like a DeMar DeRozan or a Zach LaVine. Like, there's avenues, yes, but it's going to be up to this front office and whether they're going to be competent enough to make the correct move.
I had another question for you because I agree with you. I do think we're kind of as optimistic as I like to remain. I do think we are in limbo in sense of we don't really have a direction. And like you said, we don't really know who we're trying to build around. Let me ask you this. Let's say the best happens, right? Let's say we are like right there at that 6-7 spot, but we just miss it. And so we're first team to play, but we get in there and we're competitive in the series, in the first round. Would you want to bring Doug Christie back to try to just continue to build this thing that he's just kind of inherited? Or would you rather kind of commit to a new voice with a legitimate system, someone who has an idea of like, oh, I can bring the system from this team and make it, and make it my own, and do kind of like the Mike Brown thing, like how he did with the Warriors and adopted their system type of thing, right? Do you think Doug has the capability to do that? And would you want him back as a head coach next year? Because normally you don't see them hire the interim long term. So that's another question of, if Doug is successful, will they officially hire them? So that's something we might need to take into account here if they do well.
So, one thing to keep in mind with that is Doug was in the running at one point for the head coaching position. Ultimately never got it, obviously, but he was always in line to have a high coaching role here in Sacramento. So I wouldn't be shocked if the season ended and the Kings, had to make this decision that if they moved forward with Doug Christie as head coach. I wouldn't be shocked by that at all. But I would be a little frustrated if you didn't weigh your options. And I'm not going to say that there are great options out there, but there are options out there. And it's worth an interview, and it's worth, finding out if there is something there that would work. Because there's some damn good coaches out there who, are either sitting on a couch, making a lot of money off of their last, coaching contract,
Mm-hmm.
or they're sitting on a bench as an assistant. There are some loaded coaching staffs around the league right now. And, I kind of think about those guys because they're in the thick of it. I'm not going to say that, the guys who are sitting at home are not necessarily, ready to, in shape to coach a team, right, by any standpoint, but guys who've been traveling the entire season, who are used to seeing, this system that's going on in front of them. We're used to seeing the Sacramento Kings, who have seen the Sacramento Kings throughout, the last 2 seasons. They have an idea what this team, might be. And if you can kind of get on the same page as them, it would make sense to, in my eyes, and it would be the right move to move forward with a head coach who has been established in this league and who has made a name for himself and made a team for himself prior to wherever they're at now. But with Doug Christie, it's hard because we love Doug. Sacramento loves Doug Christie, and that that feeling is mutual with him to Sacramento. But the head coaching experience and lack thereof is something that you really can't just turn a blind eye to.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that he's getting an incredible run right now, an opportunity to learn the head coaching ropes. But like, if the season ended right now, I'm not moving forward with Doug Christie. I would keep him on our staff, but I'm not moving forward with him as a head coach.
Totally fair. I feel the same way. I was curious just to see, because, there's no sense in just sticking with a guy just because he has a little bit of success. We saw how, this team wouldn't stick with Mike Brown, even though they just signed him the year before. And again, that's a product of the team that we follow. The Kings are a very not that well-ran team, and we thought the winning cures kind of everything. Winning kind of is deodorant for the toxicity that we see. So, this King team is what it is. They've been this way for so long. It's so frustrating that that's the case. So, maybe in a way I'm kind of talking myself into the pessimistic style of things, just because, you're right. Like, this could all just go flat on its face. And at the same time, I don't even think anyone in SAC, would be that surprised. And it is kind of a bummer that that's where we're at, but we need to go by game. So let's take a look at just this next little stretch. I know it's going to be tough, but if as fans, I think, what we want to see down this at least these next 4 games, because this is going to be these are the games you can get. You have the New Look Warriors on Friday. Then I know we got a game against the Mavs. I think it's the 4th one of the bunch. And then we got the Jazz. And the Hornets are in there as well. So it's like you have teams that are going through their own turmoil that you should be beating because of the talent around you. And if there's ever a chance to get momentum and to prepare for the harder stretch, this might be it. But what are you looking for in this next stretch?
I mean, that's it. You just nailed it. So coming out of the break, you play the Warriors on Friday, and then you play the Hornets on Monday, and those are both home games. So you want to develop that momentum, and you want to get that energy going through your team from that home crowd in those games. And you obviously want to get a win because that's going to build that energy. Then you take your efforts on the road to a Jazz team who has been struggling all season long with identity problems up and down as well. So that's another team you can build off of. If you can get these 3 wins, you go into essentially the toughest stretch of the season, which is where you see teams like the Rockets, the Nuggets. You see a De'Aaron Fox who's ready to put 40 down on the Kings on March 7th. You see the Clippers, the Knicks. You see the Warriors again, a Suns team who is just, you can't just write them off. They're still a good team. You see the Grizzlies, if they have Ja Morant, good luck. Cavaliers, like this is a tough stretch. You absolutely need to build this momentum in these first 3 games out of the break. And I will be very concerned if you lose to a team like the freaking Hornets of these 3 games. If you lose that game, even if you win the other 2, I'm going to be massively concerned because it's just going to prove all that much more how inconsistent this team is.
Yeah, and these are the things we need to look out for now that this is a totally new team. We don't know what to expect, and it's gonna be.
I'm just gonna say, like, it's frustrating having to have these conversations like this because we, all off season we were so high on this team. We were so excited to talk about this team for the future because we had a future. We had an awesome looking future, a bright future. I'm thinking back to July. I think it was July when we signed DeMar DeRozan. And we're on cloud 9. Like, we don't get a free agent like that. It's is wild. And then, like, if you had told me the next day after we signed DeMar that we would end up firing Mike Brown in December and then trading De'Aaron Fox in January, I would laugh at you and say you're tripping. Like, man, no way.
Right.
It's so frustrating, and you know, it's negative around Sacramento right now. And I hate having to go on the pod and be a Debbie Downer like this, but this is kind of the state of the Kings, and it's been this way for so many years. And I know a lot of Kings media is getting a lot of hate right now and negative energy towards them because they are having the same kind of conversations we're having, and it's all negative. And people are like, can't you guys just show some optimism? Can't you guys just be positive? It's hard. It's really hard to go out and be positive about a team that just hasn't made positive moves for a number of years. And like the biggest example I can make is Boogie, DeMarcus Cousins. This last All-Star break, he was asked about the state of the Sacramento Kings, and he essentially said, like, you know, they peaked in 2021-22 when they made the playoffs, and they were, you know, essentially satisfied from there. They didn't do anything to build off of that. They didn't build the future off that. Like we've talked about, they've just stayed stagnant. They didn't make any moves that offseason to improve. They thought that just keeping the core together and running it back would improve the team. Like, that was mistake number 1 of 80 that they made, ultimately leading up to Mike Brown being fired, who was De'Aaron Fox's favorite, coach. Like,
yeah,
it's the reason I'm even going on this rant right now is I'm talking to our community, because I know this is negative, and I'm sorry that it's negative, but the state of the Sacramento Kings is a bit negative right now. And it's hard to have an optimistic conversation about this team when for so many years we've seen the same trends over and over.
Yeah. And, you know, honestly, there's not really much I can say to that. That isn't, you know, there's nothing to really counter that, because that has been the case.
Yeah.
This team has just been, they've been stuck. And we talked about it last year. We're like, oh, you know, hopefully, you know, this team can't get complacent. This team can't ride the high of the playoff win and just assume that success is coming their way. They have to earn it. And, you know, listen, they beat the Warriors last year, and we were like, okay, fine, but we have to be better this year. And then we just weren't. And then we created all this, internal turmoil and set ourselves up for failure. So it'll be interesting to see how we do these next, couple weeks, and see what position we're in, and whether we're paying attention to the draft earlier than or not this year. So did you have any, final thoughts in terms of the things you wanted to touch up on before we head out here?
One little fun thing is, obviously All-Star weekend, they did it a little bit better this year. I didn't watch any of the All-Star game on Sunday, and I'm proud to admit that I didn't. And
same.
And it was the second least watched All-Star game of all time. Wild, right? But this Friday and Saturday events were one of the most streamed all time. And the Saturday events, that dunk contest was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Mac McClung jumping over a car and doing all the crazy things he was doing. But ultimately, shout out Stephon Castle, who we wanted to get in that trade for De'Aaron Fox. Shout out to Stephon Castle for not using a single prop and just showing raw athleticism. And afterward, they were talking to Mac McClung about, the dunk contest and coming back next year. And he was like, well, if they want me back bad enough, I think essentially alluding to if they'll pay him more money than what he was getting paid here, which I don't blame him.
I mean, yeah.
If they want him back bad enough, he might, consider coming back. John Morant hits Twitter. And Zach LaVine hits Twitter. Aaron Gordon hits Twitter. Giannis hits Twitter. Like, we could be in for a really fun dunk contest. And, Marcos, we might see a Sacramento King in the dunk contest. And it might be Zach LaVine, who is one of my favorite players. So I'm a little bit excited about that. That's something a little positive to kind of build off of.
No, I do think, and we had talked about this, it was interesting watching Mac McClung and Stephon Castle. It wasn't identical to Levine and Gordon, but I thought it was like a fair comparison where Gordon was the one using all the stunts and the tricks and all the gadgets and
Mm-hmm.
making awesome dunks. And Levine was just pure dunking, just using his athleticism and his creativity. And Levine won. So I thought it was interesting to see it. And I wonder with McClung if he's, there's only so many dunks a guy can do. Like there's only so many things he can come up with before it kind of becomes stale. I know in his particular position in the G League, he kind of has a whole year to kind of really mess around with it, but it's like, it is interesting. But I thought his dunks were impressive. I didn't think, I do think that he won. I do think he had the better dunk contest of the two, but I understand the argument. And it would be very cool if this is what it takes to get some of these pure guys back. Maybe some of these older guys for like one last dunk contest, one last run. Just
Mm-hmm.
give us a 4-stack of awesome dudes. I would take that any day. So no, it was a very fun contest, very fun weekend. I obviously, like you, I didn't watch the game either, and I'm totally okay with that.
Good for you.
Until they make the game have like real stakes, it's not really worth watching anymore. So
one thing that I did see was like a potential one-on-one thing, like doing some one-on-one tournaments and like $1 million payout for the winner. Like that would be sick. I would be excited. Cool. But then you got a guy like Kyrie who's just gonna run the table on him. So it would be fun to watch, though.
No, I think at some point those guys would do it. I do think guys, they missed their chance to kind of implement it earlier. You could have had LeBron in there. Like, you'll watch a 44-year-old LeBron go up against Luka in a 1v1, but I mean, it's not the same. But it is what it is. Right. But that would be a cool concept. Honestly, if you're gonna trash the game altogether and just let the guys who got named All-Stars play in a similar style, like that, maybe have maybe do like a big men only versus guards only or stuff like that. And then go from there. Or, like you have to be in the same height in order to, compete.
Yeah.
That way it's not totally unfair. And then I don't know, some shit like that. They'll figure it out.
I like it.
But no, it's cool. So we'll see what happens. Now that the Eagles, now that the football season's over, and obviously it's going to be draft season here in a little bit, but it's Kings time now. Now it's time to just, get through the thick of it, get through the playoff push, see if we can make the playoffs, and see if they have enough juice in the tank to get it done. So we'll see what happens.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, y'all. We will end it off here. This was episode 77 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at any of our social medias that are located up above. You can hit us up for all you audio listeners. All the links to the descriptions are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, review, follow. We appreciate all your love and support. And guys, now that Ben and I are 10 minutes away, we got some stuff in the works that's going to be coming here that we're going to change this pod to make it even bigger and better. Most likely during the summer and by football season, but we got a lot of stuff planned, and we can't wait to surprise y'all with big news. Hopefully by episode 100, that should give us more than enough time to do that.
Definitely.
But we're really excited to grow with you guys each and every single day. We hit over 100 subscribers. We're finally in that range. So now we're really excited to keep pushing and keep growing. So we love you.
We have a community.
Exactly.
We love you guys.
We love you guys so much. So thank you for joining us each and every week. I am Marcos Conan. Beside me here as always is
Benny the Jet Reds.
All right, y'all. We love y'all. We will talk to you next week. Peace.
Peace.